They sneered at him for inheriting a crumbling old shack, until his dog Hawk nudged open the creaky door to unveil a secret that could turn everything upside down. They scoffed when war veteran Eli Turner received nothing but a tiny, dilapidated cabin tucked deep in the Montana wilderness. But the second his faithful dog Hawk pushed that weathered door wide open, Eli stepped into a mystery far greater than the bitterness thrown his way. Stay with me and share your thoughts in the comments. Where are you tuning in from today? Rain fell in cold, thin sheets, slipping beneath collars and seeping down to the bone. Bitter Peak Cemetery rested on a desolate hill just beyond town, surrounded by towering firs swaying under Montana's overcast sky. Eli Turner lingered apart from the crowd, clustered beneath umbrellas around the fresh grave, head bowed, hands trembling slightly, while gripping the leash of his faithful companion, Hawk, a sturdy shepherd mix who nestled close to Eli's leg. Eyes, sharp ears alert, watching each movement like the soldier he once was. Eli wondered which hurt more, the biting rain against his face or the cutting whispers floating through it. That's all he left you, a rundown cabin barely holding up. Well, what else would you expect to give a failure? The Turner name was built on wealth ranches, hotels, investments passed down for generations, none of which ever found their way to Eli. He was the family's outcast. The veteran marked by scars no one dared mention. The man who returned from Afghanistan quieter, thinner, and profoundly lonely. The one who carried losses heavier than words could ever reveal. He fixed his gaze on the casket, sinking slowly into the damp earth, its polished wood darkened by rain. Carved brass letters spelled out his uncle's name, Samuel Turner, Uncle Sam, the only one who ever reached out to Eli, never flinching when Eli froze during fireworks or dropped to his knees from a truck's sudden backfire. He'd bring coffee and sit on the porch chatting about nothing important, somehow making Eli feel human once more. Now even that last piece of home had slipped away. Hawk gave a soft whine, nudging Eli's hand with his nose as lightning cracked across the storm-darkened sky. Eli recoiled at the sharp sound, a fleeting flash, but one Hawk sensed deeply. The dog pressed closer, steady and unwavering. Eli curled his fingers into the rough fur around Hawk's neck, thankful for his grounding presence. The priest's final prayer echoed through the graveyard. Murmurs of hollow sympathy drifted on the wind, scented faintly with perfume and damp wool as the crowd thinned. Yet Eli stayed rooted in place long after everyone else vanished toward their cars. He wasn't ready to leave, not yet. Raindrops tugged at the brim of his hat, trailing cold lines down his face, but he didn't brush them away. Soft, splashing footsteps approached from behind. "Mr. Turner," a voice called out. Eli turned to see an elderly man stepping forward wearing a dark overcoat and clutching a leather binder under one arm. Gregory Fletcher, his uncle's lawyer for nearly 3 decades, stood before him. White hair plastered to his forehead, fogged glasses, but a sincere, respectful nod. "Your uncle asked me to meet with you today in private." Eli swallowed hard, thinking of the will. "Yes." Fletcher glanced once more toward the grave. "Your uncle cared for you deeply. He made that very clear." From across the hill came a sharp, cutting laugh. Mark Turner, Eli's cousin, stood beneath a sprawling umbrella surrounded by family smirking in Eli's direction. Well, look who's here," Mark called out. "Got yourself the cab in the old wreck, no less." Laughter erupted from them. Even through the steady rain, Eli caught sight of Linda Turner hiding a smile behind her hand, feigning sympathy. Eli's jaw clenched tight. Hawk's body tensed beside him, muscles coiled as though ready to step up and protect. Fletcher shifted closer, lowering his voice to a calm whisper. "Ignore them. They can count dollars, sure, but they have no idea of real value." Eli pushed his gaze away from the taunting family and locked eyes on the lawyer. "What exactly did my uncle leave me?" Fletcher reached into his coat and pulled out a cloth-wrapped object. He carefully unfolded it, revealing a heavy, rusted iron key, its teeth elegantly carved into an intricate design. "He left you the cabin." Fletcher said. But he also left this. He was clear that the cabin holds more than meets the eye, though he never said exactly how. His exact words to me were, "Eli will understand when the time is right. Only someone who truly needs it can open that door." Eli stared at the key, resting in Fletcher's palm. The metal looked ancient, older than the cabin itself. Older than the Turner family, maybe. Hawk leaned forward, nose to the air, then let out a low, curious growl. Not hostile, but alert, as though sensing something familiar. Fletcher slid the key into Eli's hand. "Your uncle trusted you with this. He told me to tell you that everything he couldn't say in life awaits you up there." "Why me?" Eli asked quietly. The lawyer hesitated for a moment before answering. "Because he believed you have the strength to face what lies ahead." A shiver ran down Eli's spine, not from the rainfall, but from something deeper, a whisper echoing through the surrounding mountains. Hawk pressed close against his side again. Eli looked down at the loyal dog, then back at the key, still warm in his palm. The weight of its responsibility was undeniable. He carefully tucked it into his pocket. Behind him, Mark shot out a loud, mocking scoff. "Enjoy your little shack, Eli. Try not to freeze your bones off." Hawk's ears pinned back sharply. Eli soothed him with a gentle hand. "Easy, boy." He glanced back once more at the grave, the rain softening like the sky had finally given up its tears. Eli whispered a quiet farewell, turned around, and set off toward his truck, Hawk faithfully following close behind. The mountains towered ahead, dark and expectant, harboring a cabin only he and his dog were meant to unlock. "Let's go home, boy," he murmured. Hawk barked once, low and sure, as if he already knew the way. By the time Eli climbed into his weathered pickup, the rain had eased into a fine mist. The truck rattled and coughed twice, before the engine finally roared to life, sounding battered, but determined not to quit. Hawk leapt into the passenger seat, shook water from his coat, and sat upright, eyes locked on the winding mountain road ahead. Eli glanced over, managing a faint, weary smile. "You've always had more courage than me," he whispered. Hawk nudged his shoulder gently, as if to say it wasn't courage at all. "Yeah, it's about loyalty." They drove past the last towering pines guarding the cemetery, driving into the narrow path that vanished deep within the harsh wilderness of the Bitter Peak. The world faded into tones of damp gravel and shadowy evergreen treetops. With every mile behind them, the noise and clamor of town life quietly slipped further away, and the mountain stillness wrapped around the truck like a heavy cloak. The windshield wipers squeaked in steady rhythm, brushing away relentless sheets of mist. But the silence was far from comforting. It held whispers of ghosts. Eli's grip tightened on the steering wheel as the trees crowded closer around them. He sensed the old memories stirring, clawing at the edges of his mind, just like they always did on long, lonely roads. For a fleeting second, the sound wasn't rain at all. It was the distant thud of helicopter blades. The wipers weren't clearing glass, they were gunfire. The pine reflection in the window wasn't Montana's wilderness. It was Afghanistan, a dusty valley haunted by echoes of explosions, his chest-constricted breath growing thin. Then Hawk leaned in, resting his head gently on Eli's thigh, steady, grounding, alive with warmth. Eli exhaled slowly as the world snapped back into focus. The rain fell again. The trees stood tall once more. The truck rumbled on. The ghosts retreated. "You're okay?" he whispered, unsure if he meant the dog or himself. The key in his pocket felt heavier with each passing moment. He drew it halfway out, watching the faint light glint off its rusty teeth. There was something about that key, ancient, oddly familiar in a way he couldn't quite explain. Hawk's eyes darted toward it again, just too quick to be by chance. Eli raised an eyebrow. "What secrets do you hold?" Hawk blinked slowly, deliberate. The mountain road tightened into a single dirt track. Mud flung up from the tires as the truck battled steep climbs and sudden drops. The deeper they pressed in, the darker the forest grew. Trees seemed to lean in as if quietly eavesdropping. Rain drummed on the truck's roof in heavy drops. A cold settled inside, despite the heater's warm breath. Finally, the overgrown trail leading to the old cabin came into view. Eli eased off the accelerator, searching for worn markers. A jagged boulder, the stump of an ancient cedar, a fork in the path swallowed up by grass. He hadn't set foot here since he was a boy, but his uncle had guided him through these woods countless times. Every turn carried the whisper of gentler days. The path turned slick and rough. The truck groaned under the strain. "Come on, girl," Eli murmured to the engine, coaxing it like a weary soldier. "Almost there." A sharp clap of thunder cracked over the mountains. Eli flinched at the sound, his shoulders tense. Hawk sat up, ears alert, eyes flicking toward the window. He gave a calming nudge, but the tightness in Eli's neck stayed firm. He despised storms, always had. Storms sounded like the darkest nights overseas, the ones he wished he could forget. But the road was too narrow to turn around, and the cabin was close now. He pressed onward, fighting to keep his gaze steady and his mind silent. When the trees finally broke open and the clearing revealed itself, Eli let out a breath he hadn't even realized he was holding. There it was, the cabin. Small, crooked, scarred by decades of Montana's fierce storms. Its roof sagged on one side, moss creeping up the walls like living veins. The porch looked barely strong enough to hold a step. A tattered shutter fluttered feebly in the gusts, yet somehow it seemed alive. Hawk leaned close to the window, his nose twitching. A deep rumble stirred within his chest, not a warning but a spark of recognition. Eli switched off the engine. The sudden silence weighed heavy. He stepped into the crisp air, pulling his coat tighter, while Hawk leaped down to stand beside him. Together they moved toward the cabin, their boots sinking softly into the damp earth. The door stared back just as he remembered. Faded paint iron handle, deep gouges worn by the passage of time. Eli reached into his pocket and drew forth the ancient key, holding it up to the lock. The metal seemed out of place for this door, as if it belonged to another era. He slipped it into the keyhole. It wouldn't turn. He tried once more. No luck. A sigh of frustration escaped him. "Figures," he muttered. "Even the door's pushing me away." Hawk sniffed at the door's base, then straightened. The dog stepped back, raised a paw, and nudged precisely the spot between handle and frame. A deliberate, practiced push, a quiet click. The latch popped open. Eli stared wide-eyed. "You've got to be kidding me." Slowly the door creaked ajar, releasing a warm breath that shouldn't exist in a cabin long abandoned with no power. His heart pounded fiercely. Hawk stepped inside. First tail held high, his stance confident, as if returning to a place he belonged. Eli wiped the rain from his face and followed. He braced for decay, cobwebs, cold emptiness, but instead found warmth. Soft light, the subtle scent of pine and fresh coffee. Lanterns glowed gently from wall hooks. A quilt lay folded neatly on the couch. The fireplace was alive, flames crackling quietly. A neat stack of fresh logs stood beside it. The floor swept clean. The table spotless. Someone had cared for this place. Recently. Eli swallowed hard, whispering, This can't be." Hawk padded forward, his nose guiding him to a wooden table where a single envelope rested. Eli stepped closer. His name was penned there in his uncle's unmistakable handwriting. He picked it up with shaking hands. "Eli, welcome home," he whispered aloud. Lightning split the sky behind him, through the open doorway, flooding the cabin with a sudden white glow. For the first time since the funeral, Eli felt something strange settle deep in his chest. Not fear or sorrow, but something new, a spark of beginning. He set the envelope down gently and knelt beside Hawk, burying his hand in the dog's thick fur. "Looks like we're not sleeping in the truck tonight," he said softly. Hawk wagged his tail in reply. Outside the storm rumbled, but inside this cabin, a quiet warmth held firm, steady, almost protective. Eli didn't fully grasp it yet, but he could feel it. And for now, that was more than enough. He closed the door behind them, sealing out the wind that clawed at the walls. The cabin glowed with a gentle amber light from the lanterns casting soft shadows along the wooden floorboards. Eli stepped deeper inside his boots, echoing softly within the cozy quiet. Hawk led the way nose low, tail barely wagging, moving like a seasoned scout surveying their shelter. This place should be crumbling, Eli whispered softly to himself. Then why does it feel like someone just walked out 5 minutes ago? A kettle simmered quietly atop the stove. A thick wool blanket rested folded on the couch's arm, while a neat stack of firewood stood patiently by the hearth. Nothing here seemed forsaken. Nothing felt forgotten or abandoned. The cabin breathed life and care, even though no living soul had crossed its threshold in years, at least none alive. Eli's eyes fell on the envelope lying on the table, his name scrawled boldly in his Uncle Samuel's unmistakable handwriting. The ink bore faint smudges along the edges, as if the letter had only recently been placed there. He leaned in, fingertips brushing the coarse paper. Hawk let out a gentle breath, circling the table before settling beside it, standing sentinel like a loyal guardian. Eli unfolded the letter. Eli, if these words have reached you, then I have departed. I knew you would come, not because others cared, but because you alone have always understood this land. This cabin is more than just wood and nails. It cradles memories and secrets entrusted only to those strong enough to bear them. Only the one truly destined for this place will unlock its door. Trust Hawk. He knows the truth even if you don't yet. Eli paused, feeling Hawk's unwavering gaze fixed on him, filled with quiet knowing. He pressed on, reading, "Here you will find peace and purpose, but be wary. The ground beneath your feet has been coveted across generations, and some will stop at nothing to steal what is not theirs." Slowly, Eli lowered the letter. The weight of those words pressed deeply on his chest. He swallowed hard, carefully, refolding the envelope and setting it gently down. Hawk nudged Eli's knee with his nose, understanding the gravity of the moment. "I don't really know what he meant," Eli murmured, "but I guess it's something we'll have to figure out." Outside, lightning tore across the sky, briefly flooding the cabin with daylight. Shadows danced wildly over the walls, then settled as thunder faded into the distance. Taking a steadying breath, Eli moved toward the fireplace, stretching out his hands to the warmth. He felt a strange mixture, safe, yet uneasy, comforted but restless, as if the cabin both welcomed and warned him with quiet ferocity. Hawk's claws clicked softly on the wooden floor as he paced, sniffing every nook and beam, alert but calm. He paused by the front door, ears perked high, before returning to Eli's side. "You sent something?" Eli asked. Hawk lifted his head, inhaled deeply, and then relaxed. Whatever it was had passed. No threat remained. "Good boy," Eli whispered, rubbing behind Hawk's ear affectionately. Hawk leaned into the touch, his breath rumbling with contentment. Eli stepped further inside, absorbing each detail around him. The kitchen was orderly, a sharp contrast to his uncle's cluttered townhome. The shelves were immaculate, every item in its place. A lantern flickered with a steady flame, its wick trimmed with precision. In the small bedroom, the bed lay freshly made, the quilt pulled tight, a gesture his uncle reserved for special visitors. But this felt different. It wasn't set for guests. It was set for him. He brushed his hand over the quilt, whispering, "Why did you prepare all this?" "Uncle Sam." The room held its silence, offering no answers. Hawk padded in and settled at Eli's feet, gently licking a raindrop from the cuff of his jeans. Eli knelt down beside him, stroking his broad shoulders. The dog's steady warmth was a comforting anchor, a lifeline that had held him together through darker nights than this one. A soft creak echoed throughout the cabin. Eli tensed his heart, thumping fiercely against his ribs. Hawk sprang up instantly, moving toward the doorway with his body taut and ears sharply alert. "What was that?" Eli whispered. Another soft, tentative creak came from the living room. He stepped out of the bedroom and spotted the front door, gently swinging on its hinges, pushed open just a few inches by the wind. He exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Just the storm," he murmured. But Hawk didn't soften. He inched closer to the door, his nose-twitching muscles coiled with tension. Eli yanked the door shut and latched it firmly with the old iron catch. Rain pounded the roof. The wind howled outside, yet inside the fire blazed with warmth and stillness. Eli sank down at the small kitchen table, the letter laid out before him. He stared at it long and hard, the storm's fury a distant roar, the cabin's walls seeming to breathe gently with every gust. "Strong enough to carry them?" he whispered. What was he trying to say? Hawk curled close by his feet, ears twitching at every whisper of sound. Eli slipped his hand into his pocket and pulled out the key once more. The metal was cold, rough, and ancient. He turned it over in his palm, tracing the peculiar notches along its edges. "How'd you know how to open that door?" he asked Hawk. "I didn't do anything," Hawk replied, with a slow blink, calm, wise, almost human in his gaze. "You're keeping something from me," Eli said softly, a weary smile touching his lips. "Maybe I'm just a little slow," Hawk seemed to say, as the lanterns flickered with the gust pressing against the cabin's walls. Eli leaned back in his chair, exhaustion finally catching up. His body ached from the day's strain. His heart was heavy but steady, as if he had finally settled exactly where he was meant to be. He rose crossed to the couch by the fire and sank into its worn cushions. Hawk jumped up beside him, resting his head gently on Eli's thigh. Eli laid his hand on Hawk's chest, feeling the slow, steady beat beneath his palm. "This place," he whispered, eyes fixed on the flickering flames. "It's more than just a cabin." A thunderclap startled him again, but only briefly. Hawk snuggled closer, a steadying presence reminding him he wasn't alone anymore. And as the fire popped and the storm raged outside, Eli felt something he hadn't known in years: safety. He felt like he'd been chosen. He didn't understand why yet, but he knew the answer was coming. The storm eased by dawn, leaving the forest fresh with wet pine and cold stone scents. Gentle strands of pale gray light filtered through the cabin's windows, casting soft bars of brightness across the floor. Eli awoke on the couch, stiff from the night, but warmer than he expected. The fire had burned down to glowing embers softly crackling in the hearth. Hawk lay curled on the rug beside him, chest rising and falling in calm, steady breaths. And as Eli shifted, one of Hawk's ears twitched, suddenly alert. The dog's eyes locked onto him, shining bright despite the long, restless night. Eli offered a faint smile and gently stroked Hawk's head. "Morning, soldier." Hawk nudged Eli's hand with his nose, then stretched his limbs, shaking loose fur into the still air. Eli rubbed at his weary eyes as a quiet tug of memory pulled at him, something from the depths of the night. He straightened up, his gaze settling on the kitchen table, where the envelope sat untouched in the silence, just as he had left it. The phrase echoed inside him, haunting, "Only those who truly need this place will ever open its door." That line replayed like an unsolved riddle. Eli rose, Hawk padding close behind. On the table, the letter rested beside the key, its edges crisp ink, dark and deliberate. Eli lifted the letter again, smoothing the paper, reading its message once more. In the soft morning light, the words carried weight, a deep and purposeful call. He whispered them softly aloud. "This cabin isn't just wood and nails. It holds memories and secrets meant only for those strong enough to bear them." He paused, releasing a slow breath. Strong enough? His uncle had believed in that. Believed that Eli of all people could shoulder something hidden here. But what was kept out there in the shadows? Hawk nudged his leg. The dog's nose pointed toward the back wall of the cabin, urging him to follow. Eli frowned, but obeyed. The cabin's rear was simple, weathered pine walls, a narrow window, a coat rack, and an ancient trunk his uncle had locked tight for decades. Eli knelt before the trunk, memories flooding back. He'd once asked his uncle what it held inside, only to be met with a smile and a quiet, one-day kiddo, and today seemed that day. He placed his palm on the worn top. The leather straps were cracked, but still held firm, and the metal latch was strong. He pulled at it, locked. Yet beneath his touch, something else caught his eye. an emblem faint yet clear once he brushed away the dust, a shield enclosing 2 crossed rifles. A military insignia, not his own units, but old. Perhaps from his uncle's studies of Civil War artifacts. Eli rose, casting a glance back at the table. The key. He retrieved it and faced the trunk again. The key slid smoothly into the latch as if it had been waiting for him. With a gentle twist, there was a soft scrape click, and the lid creaked open. Inside lay bundles wrapped in fabric. Eli lifted the foremost bundle, unfolding the cloth to reveal a handwritten journal, its pages yellowed and worn. The cover was cracked, bearing a faded name scrawled in ink, Samuel Turner. A tightening gripped his heart. He opened the first page. March 12th, 1989. The cabin is stirring again. I can feel it in the very walls. This land was designed to shelter soldiers haunted by their pasts. I only pray Eli never has to need this sanctuary as others once did. Eli swallowed hard, turning the page with care. I found the entrance today. It hasn't been opened since before my father's time. Beneath lies things never meant for the grasp of greedy men. I must protect them. And someday someone stronger will have to take my place. I have to protect them at all costs. Someday someone even braver will need to carry this burden forward. He exhaled with a trembling breath. Someone stronger. A surge of emotion swept through him, loss, pride, confusion, and fear all intricately entwined like roots around his chest. Hawk nudged him once more firmly this time. The dog padded toward the far corner of the cabin, sniffing at the wooden floor. His tail stiffened, ears perked high. He gently pawed at a certain spot, then glanced back at Eli. "You found something," Eli whispered. "Didn't you?" Heart pounding, Eli crouched beside Hawk and tapped the boards. A hollow echo answered. The normal floor ended here, and something hidden began. He stood, grabbed a lantern from the wall, and knelt again. This time he searched for a crack, a seam, anything. His fingertips traced the spaces between the planks until he found it. A thin split where the boards didn't align perfectly. He slipped his nails beneath it and pulled. Nothing budged. He tried again, pulling harder. Still no give. Then Hawk stepped forward, placed his paw exactly where Eli was trying to lift, and pressed down with steady pressure. The board shifted. Eli's breath hitched. He grasped the edge and heaved. A section of the cabin floor lifted like a hatch, revealing a dark void below. A cool draft rose from beneath, carrying the scent of damp earth and ancient stone. He held the lantern over the opening. A ladder descended into blackness, old but solid. The walls below were stone, not wood reminiscent of a root cellar or bunker. "What the hell?" Eli whispered. Hawk paced beside him, tail rigid stance, protective, yet calm, silently urging him onward. Eli hesitated, his heartbeat pounding as a familiar, unwelcome wave of fear crept up. Tight spaces had haunted him since the collapse overseas. His throat tightened. Hawk nudged his hand, pressing his warm fur into Eli's palm. "You think I should go in?" Eli murmured. Hawk's tail flicked once, quiet, sure. He took a deep breath and gripped the ladder. The wood felt cold under his hands. He glanced around the cabin one last time. The warm glow of the lantern, the dying embers, the letter on the table before descending into the unknown. Each step groaned beneath his weight, stirring dust motes in the lantern light. When his boots hit the floor, he raised the lantern higher. The room was small, about 10 feet across. Stone walls curved around him. A wooden table stood center, scattered with maps, old papers, and tools. A chest rested against the wall. The air was crisp, untouched by time. One map caught his eye, a detailed sketch of underground streams and mineral veins. Another chart displayed Bitter Peak land ownership stretching back a century. Pinned to the far wall was a large parchment bearing a hand-drawn symbol, the same crossed rifles inside a shield. "This is what he meant," Eli whispered. "This is why they coveted this land." He felt Hawk slip softly beside him, pressing close. Eli knelt, steadying the dog, with a hand across his back. "You were right," he said softly. "You always know." He lifted the lantern again, a rising unease settling deep in his gut. Not the sharp sting of danger, but the slow, heavy weight of understanding. This cabin wasn't just a gift, it was a burden to bear. A warning, a secret someone had once tried to steal. Now it was Eli's burden to guard with unwavering resolve. His gaze met Hawk's. "We're not facing this alone, are we?" Hawk peered into the bunker's darkness, ears perked, every muscle taut, as if he already sensed the threat looming closer than Eli dared imagine. Climbing from the hidden cellar, Eli's muscles tightened, and his breath grew uneven. He closed the hatch with care, sealing away the shadows hidden beneath the floorboards. Hawk circled twice, his nose tracing the edges as if etching the spot into memory. The lantern flickered against the wooden walls, stretching shadows that danced with every gust outside. Straightening, Eli brushed dust from his hands and stepped toward the front door. He craved fresh air, cold, clear air to quiet the storm swirling inside him. Hawk followed, rubbing gently against his leg, a silent comfort. On the porch, Eli breathed deeply, allowing the crisp morning air to settle in his lungs. The forest sprawled wide, cloaked in mist. Pine-covered ridges rolled like a vast, dark green ocean, reaching toward distant, snow-capped peaks. The rain had passed, leaving the world cleansed and silent. For a fleeting moment, everything felt frozen in time. Hawk's body tensed first. His ears snapped erect, his nose lifted. A low growl rumbled from his chest. Eli stopped cold. "What's wrong, boy?" A sharp crack from the tree line shattered the stillness. Then another snapped. Hawk shifted forward, stance firm, muscles ready to spring. Through lingering fog, two figures stepped out, boots sinking into soft earth. Coats too pristine for the wild mountains, faces hauntingly familiar. Mark Turner and Linda Turner, Eli's cousins, the same ones who had mocked him at the funeral, treating him like nothing more than a blot on the family name. "What are you doing here?" Eli's voice was low-edged with caution. Mark's smirked hands buried in jacket pockets. "We were just passing through." His words dripped with thinly veiled lies. "Thought we'd check in on you. City boy lost out here all alone." "Dangerous," they said. Linda moved forward, eyes sweeping the cabin with a mix of disdain and cold calculation. "This place is smaller than I recall, and you're really living here." "Yes," Eli replied evenly. "Now tell me why you're here." Mark shrugged. "Fine. We want to buy the cabin." Eli stayed silent. Mark pressed on. "It's a liability, really. Rotting foundation, black mold termites. Things you just can't handle. But we're reasonable people. We'll take it off your hands." He pulled out a folded check, the amount written in neat ink, $7,000 in cash. Eli stared at the paper, then at Mark's expectant face. "That's an insult," he said sharply. Mark's smile faded. "It's more than it's worth." Linda stepped closer. "Look, Eli, you're not thinking straight. You came back from war. You're different now. Everyone sees it. You don't belong out here. We're just trying to help." Hawk growled louder then. The dog positioned himself between Eli and the cousins, eyes locked on Mark, as if sensing something rotten beneath the man's smooth veneer. Eli rested a steady hand on Hawk's back. "I'm not selling. Not now. Not ever." Mark's face twisted. Anger broke through his smirk. "You don't even realize what you're sitting on." Linda shot him a sharp look of warning, but it was far too late now. The words escaped ringing out through the stillness of the forest. Eli narrowed his eyes. "What exactly are you trying to say?" Mark forced a chuckle. "Nothing. Don't get all worked up. You've never been good at lying," Eli said softly. Hawk stepped forward, his hackles rising with sharp alertness. Mark instinctively flinched while Linda shifted her stance, folding her arms tightly. "Let's just leave," she murmured, tugging on Mark's sleeve. But Mark stood frozen, his eyes drifting past Eli toward the cabin, a hungry, calculating stare. "You'll regret walking away from this," Mark warned lowly. "It's dangerous. You're not the only one who understands the true value of that place." Eli felt his heart race. This wasn't about feelings. This wasn't just about land. They knew, or at least suspected, something deeper. "I think it's best if you both leave." Eli said firmly. Hawk barked sharply, as if emphasizing the command. Mark's jaw tightened. He took a half-step forward, pointing accusingly at Eli. "This isn't finished. Not by a long shot." Linda grabbed Mark's arm, dragging him back toward the shadows of the trees. Moments later, they disappeared into the mist, their forms fading like fading ghosts. Only when the forest quieted did Eli exhale the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Hawk remained fixed, ears, twitching tail stiff, focused on the direction they'd gone. Eli knelt beside him. "Good job," he murmured, running his hand gently through the dog's fur. "I know something's wrong." Hawk lowered his head, leaning into Eli's touch, though his eyes never left the dim woods beyond. Eli rose once more, staring down the path where Mark and Linda had vanished. Unease curled along his spine, not sudden fear, but a slow, creeping realization that peril had come with names, several names. He replayed Mark's harsh words in his mind. "You don't even realize what you're sitting on. The maps, the documents, the emblem, the dealer this land was worth far more than a broken-down cabin, worth enough to kill over." Eli shut the door behind him and locked it, the sound ringing through the cabin like a sharp warning bell. Hawk prowled the floor, sniffing every corner again, restless in a way Eli couldn't shake. He sat at the table, letter in hand, the lantern's glow dim beside him. His uncle's words pressed heavier than ever. "Some folks will go to any lengths to claim what's not theirs." The cabin creaked softly, wood groaning under the weight of the mountain wind. The fire whispered in the hearth. Shadows grew long across the room. Eli looked down at Hawk. "We're not leaving," he said quietly. Hawk's tail tapped the floor once. "No matter what comes next," Eli whispered, "we'll guard this place." Hawk settled closer, planting himself firmly at Eli's feet, faithful, steadfast, unbreakable. And somewhere out in those bitter mountain woods, a twig snapped beneath a stranger's boot. But Eli didn't hear it. Not yet. Inside the cabin, silence thickened after his cousin slipped into the fog. An uneasy quiet that felt almost tangible. The fire crackled softly in the stone hearth. Yet even that warm sound couldn't soothe the tightening knot in Eli's chest. Something in Mark's voice had burrowed deep, stirring instincts he hadn't tapped into since his days in Afghanistan. Across the room, Hawk couldn't settle down. The dog paced in tight circles, his ears twitching, nose sniffing the air like he was catching scents Eli couldn't even begin to grasp. Every few steps, Hawk halted, locking his gaze on the corner by the worn oak floorboards near the bed. "Easy boy," Eli whispered, though weariness hung in his voice. "They're gone." Hawk refused to accept it. Suddenly he trotted to that corner, sitting down and staring intently at the floor. Then he dug once, twice with growing urgency. Eli frowned. "What is it now?" Hawk pawed even harder. Claws scraping faintly against the wood, tail taut, alert. Eli dropped to his knees beside him. The floor felt different there, cooler, denser, not hollow like the rest. And beneath the faded varnish, a faint seam barely caught the light. Eli's heartbeat sped up. "You've got to be kidding me." He traced his palm along the grain, pressing softly. One corner dipped almost imperceptibly. He pressed again, firmer this time. The wood gave a soft click. A gentle mechanical click, echoed like an ancient latch releasing. The floorboard lifted a fraction of an inch. Eli held his breath, eyes fixed. Hawk let out a sharp puff as if saying, "About time." "Uncle Sam," Eli whispered. "What secrets have you buried down here?" He slid his fingers beneath the edge and lifted. The wood moaned softly, swinging upward like a trapdoor. The hinges, silent and sturdy, had survived decades untouched. A cool breeze rose, carrying the faint scent of earth metal, and something ancient, preserved and free from decay. A narrow staircase descended into darkness. Eli grabbed the lantern, his thumb brushing the warm glass. Hawk stayed close, unwavering, as Eli stepped down the stairs. The wooden beams creaked beneath their weight, but deeper they went. The air shifted cooler, stiller, strangely pristine, as if time itself had sealed this place away. The stairway opened into a small, subterranean chamber. For a long moment, Eli stood silent, the lantern casting soft light over the room. Shelves lined with map tubes, old tin boxes, and leather-bound journals stood neatly in place. A sturdy wooden table rested center room, dust settled only at the edges, as if someone had been here not long ago, someone who wanted Eli to find this. Hawk sniffed every inch, tail wagging softly when he reached a weathered wooden chest. Eli set the lantern down and opened the chest. Inside, a treasure trove, maps, dozens of them, hand-drawn charts of waterways, soil routes, mineral surveys, some dating back to the early 1900s. He unfolded one carefully. It depicted Bitter Peak Forest, but not the kind tourists get shown. This map revealed a sprawling network of underground streams weaving beneath the cabin's land like veins. Several were marked with symbols, triangles, arrows, tiny notes in precise handwriting. And then Eli's eyes stopped. A star was drawn right beneath the cabin. He traced it with a finger. What could it mean? Beside the maps lay a thick leather journal, its cover cracked and worn with age, yet the name etched on it was unmistakable: Samuel Turner. Eli's throat tightened as he flipped the pages. His uncle's handwriting was neat, precise, unwavering, despite the tremors that came in his final years. Eli paused at a page marked by a ribbon. If anyone's reading this, it's you, Eli. It has to be you. His breath caught, and he pressed forward with the words, "This land isn't what the family believes it to be. It's older, richer, protected under federal veteran benefit zoning dating back to the Civil War. Those hidden springs beneath the ground, they're worth millions. But most importantly, they must never be exploited." The lantern's flame flickered as Eli read on. "Developers tried to seize it from me before. They worked through your cousins to get closer, and they'll do it again. So listen carefully, Eli. This cabin isn't a burden. It's a shield. That's why I left it to you. Because you're the only one who understands what it truly means to stand your ground." Eli leaned back, his breath shallow. His uncle always knew, always had. Hawk nudged Eli's arm, gently grounding him. "Yeah," Eli whispered. "I'm all right." Yet, deep down, uncertainty churned as he unearthed the next truth. "Hawk will guide you. I ensured he was placed in your care for a reason. He's been trained to detect threats tied to this land. Trust him above all else." Eli met Hawk's steady amber gaze, loyal, unwavering, watchful. "You knew all along, didn't you?" Hawk pressed his head softly into Eli's hand. Eli's eyes blazed, not with fear, though it lingered, but with something stronger resolve. He scanned the final lines of the page. "If your cousins come back, they won't be alone. Prepare yourself. The night ahead won't be silent for long." A chill crawled down Eli's spine as he snapped the journal shut, the lantern's light trembling. From above, faint sounds slipped down from the cabin's upper floor through creaky boards. A single footstep, then another. Eli froze. Hawk's ears rose sharply, body taut with alertness. The hairs on Eli's arms prickled. Someone was upstairs, and they weren't alone. Eli snuffed out the lantern's flame. Darkness swallowed the room. Hawk growled low and menacing. The stairs groaned beneath approaching weight, slow, deliberate, predatory. Eli's heartbeat roared in his chest. The night's quiet was shattered, and this was only the beginning. He held his breath beneath the floorboards. The cold earth pressed to his back as he crouched beside Hawk, who stood motionless, muscles coiled, eyes locked on the stairwell above. The dog's low growl rumbled through the stillness, steady warning ready. Above, slow steps crept across the wood. One step a pause, then another. Not the uncertain shuffle of the lost. This was careful, calculating, and predatory. Hawk's ears twitched in perfect sync with every sound. Eli wrapped a gentle hand around the dog's collar. "Quiet, easy," he mouthed, barely a whisper. But Hawk didn't need the reminder. He stiffened, but stayed rooted by Eli's side, waiting for the signal. Then, a voice broke the silence. Not loud, not hurried, just steady enough to send every alarm screaming through Eli's veins. "Eli, you down there, Mark?" Eli closed his eyes for a fleeting moment. Of course he knew Mark wouldn't quit easily, But showing up alone in the dead of night, so quiet, this was something else entirely. "Eli, are you there?" Mark called out. Eli shut his eyes for just a heartbeat. He'd known Mark's spirit wouldn't quit easily, but coming in the dead of night, silent and solo, now that was relentless. Mark never moved solo. Hawk's growl deepened his chest, rumbling like a warning drum. Footsteps multiplied around them. 3, maybe 4 or 5 sets now shuffled lightly over the cabin's wooden floor. Heavy boots scraping gear, men exhaling sharply through their noses. No chance these were family members. Eli's heart hammered fiercely inside his chest. He could almost feel Afghanistan wrapping around him again, dust, heat, darkness, the raw scent of sweat and gun oil. Pushing the memory aside, he focused, listening intently. "Check that side," Mark ordered. "The old man stashed something here, I just know it. Tear this place apart if you have to." Drawers slammed open, wood crashed, boots pounded across the floor like thunder. The men moved with an arrogant confidence, too sure of themselves, like they already claimed this cabin as their own. One kicked a chair aside carelessly. "Think he's hiding," Mark sneered. "He's an old MP with a limp and a mutt. No threat here." Hawk's muscles tensed tight. Eli gripped his collar, shaking his head slowly. "Not yet," he whispered. Above them, the floorboards creaked again. Footsteps neared the trapdoor, slow and deliberate. Hawk's hackles shot up so fast Eli felt his fur bristle against his knuckles. "Got a loose board here," one man muttered. "Something's underneath." Eli's pulse spiked. They'd found it the trap door. Hawk leads Eli to it, but those same instincts could give away their position to others too. A metal crowbar scraped the panel, prying beneath the edges. Eli silently counted to 3, steadying his breath deeply. Calm and controlled, his chest expanded slowly. The cold air tasted of earth and danger. Then crack. The board above jerked wood splintering loud. Hawk's snarled teeth glowing in the dark. The panel lifted just an inch. Eli acted fast, grabbing Hawk under his chest, pulling him back deeper into the narrow storage space. The dog hesitated, ready to fight his instinct to shield Eli, blazing strong. But Eli whispered, "Not now, not trapped." He needed room options angles to survive. The trapdoor creaked open again. A flashlight beam spilled through the crack, slicing thick shadows. "There's something down there," one man said quietly. "Might be him." Mark leaned closer. "If that's him, drag him out." Eli pressed his back to the far wall, Hawk trembling beside him. The darkness was suffocating, yet it also cloaked them. The trapdoor fully opened, and the flashlight's beam swept across the hidden room. "Holy crap, there's a whole setup underneath," the man breathed out. Mark cursed under his breath. "Knew it! Go down there! Bring me everything!" Eli flexed his fingers, his pulse slowing training kicking in, breathing deep, mapping a plan. He whispered low to Hawk, barely more than a breath. "When I say go, run left." Hawk's ears flicked, he got it. Boots thundered above 1-2. The silhouette of the first man appeared, descending warily, weapon raised and ready. Eli held his breath. 3 steps, then 4. The man's foot hit the last step. Now Eli exploded forward. He slammed into the man like a raging tide, seizing his wrist, twisting fiercely. The weapon clattered to the floor. Hawk lunged instantly, aiming at the man's forearm, not to kill, but to cripple. The man screamed, stumbling back. Eli shoved hard, sending him crashing into the shelf behind with a thunderous smash. "Go," Eli commanded. Hawk bolted up the stairs, crashing into the second man before he could react. The flashlight flew from the man's grip, clattering wildly down the stairwell. "What the?" another voice shouted. Eli raced after Hawk, scaling the path with hurried steps. A surge of adrenaline erased every ache in his limbs. He burst through the cabin door as chaos erupted inside. 2 men scrambled back from Hawk, one stumbling over a broken chair, cursing under his breath. Hawk planted himself firmly low to the ground, teeth bared a growl so fierce it seemed to shake the floor. "Shoot him!" a voice yelled. "No," Mark snapped sharply. "We need him alive, he's part of the deal." Suddenly, realization slammed into Eli like a freight train. Deal. So Mark was in cahoots with developers or someone far worse. "Enough!" Eli roared, his voice slicing through the chaos like a command he hadn't uttered since his days in the service. Everyone froze. Even Hawk glanced back, eyes searching for direction. Eli stepped forward, his shoulders squared, breath, even his figure flickering in the uncertain firelight. His presence shifted the atmosphere. No longer just a cornered veteran, now a soldier standing tall. "You're trespassing," he said, voice ice cold. The armed men exchanged uneasy looks. They hadn't expected him to fight. Certainly not like this. Mark regained his composure first. "Eli, don't make this harder than it needs to be. This land is worth more than you realize." Eli let out a bitter chuckle. "Oh, I know exactly what it's worth." They tensed. He had confirmed their deepest fear. Mark's jaw clenched tight. "Then you understand why we can't let you keep it." At that moment, the storm outside slammed a fierce gust into the cabin walls. Boom, the windows rattled violently, lightning briefly bathing every face in a ghostly white light. Hawk's growl intensified as he positioned himself protectively between Eli and the men. But suddenly, a sharp, agonized whine pierced the room. Eli's heart froze. Hawk had been hit. Was it a scratch? A wound he couldn't tell yet. "Back off!" Eli shouted, voice breaking with raw fury. Mark raised a hand. "Take the dog. Make him stand down." Suddenly, the energy inside the cabin shifted. Eli couldn't put it into words. The lights flickered erratically. The fire surged higher as a strange hum vibrated beneath the floorboards. It was subtle yet undeniable, as if the cabin was alive, responding to the threat. Then, thunk. A deep, resonant sound buzzed through the support beams. The window shutters slammed open and shut, driven by some unseen force trying to keep out the intruders. One lantern overhead flared bright, making the men flinch in fear. "What the hell is this place?" Mark's voice now trembled, losing its earlier confidence. "Just grab him." But Eli was already in motion. He dropped low, sweeping a man's knee with a quick kick, yanked Hawk toward the hallway, and bolted for the back door. Bullets, fists, or worse could come, but none did. Not yet. Mark's shout echoed behind him. "This isn't over, Eli!" Lightning flashed again, blinding, followed by thunder that rattled the cabin like a dire warning. Eli slammed the back door shut behind him, lungs burning as he gasped for air. The rain hit him like a storm of icy needles, drenching him instantly. Hawk collapsed, trembling against Eli's leg. Eli's voice broke as he whispered, "Stay with me, boy. Stay." The dog whimpered, but lifted his head weakly. From inside the cabin, Eli heard the men scrambling to regroup. They would come back. Harder next time. And Eli knew then they wouldn't hesitate to finish what they started. But that cabin had reacted. It had warned him, guarded him, just as his uncle had said it would. This was only the first battle in the war for Bitter Peak, and Eli was far from ready to surrender. Rain hammered down in relentless sheets, hammering the mountain with relentless force like 1,000 pounding fists. Eli half-carried, half-dragged Hawk toward the weathered woodpile shelter tucked behind the cabin. The dog trembled, each breath sharp and quick, fogging the cold air in short, desperate bursts. Eli knelt down, his hands trembling as he examined Hawk's injury. The wound was on his shoulder, bleeding, but not deep enough to be fatal. Just a graze, a warning meant to slow them down. Not meant to kill, but blood was blood. And seeing it on Hawk shattered something inside Eli that no battlefield scar ever had. "You did good," he murmured, his hand gently stroking Hawk's head. "You did everything right." Hawk softly licked Eli's wrist, leaning weakly into the touch. The storm outside intensified, wind roaring through the pine branches overhead. Thunder crashed over the mountain peaks, echoing against cliff faces like distant artillery fire. Each flash of lightning illuminated the cabin's windows, shadows shifting within. Mark's men were regrouping, planning hunting. Eli drew a steady breath, grounding himself in the discipline he'd learned. Slow inhale, slow exhale. He needed his mind clear, not clouded with panic. Hawk needed him calm, steady. "I'm right here, boy. I'm not leaving," he whispered. With care, he tore a strip from his undershirt, pressing it gently against the bleeding wound to slow the flow. Hawk flinched, but held still, trusting Eli completely. As he bound the cloth, memory surged forth, dusty heat gun fire, crackling, his squad shouting over radios filled with static, and Hawk younger then racing toward him with fearless devotion, tackling an attacker before Eli could even lift his weapon. Hawk had saved Eli once. Now it was Eli's turn. Suddenly, a glow flickered from inside the cabin. Not lightning, but something electric, pulsing before steadying into a soft light. Eli squinted, alert. What now? Hawk tried to rise, but Eli spoke softly. "Not yet. Rest." The dog whimpered once, but obeyed, settling back down. Eli's gaze drifted to the cabin. The storm's fury bent the trees like restless giants, rain drenching him to the bone as cold drops ran down his face into his collar. Still, he wouldn't move. The cabin's lights flickered again like a silent signal, almost calling him back inside. He edged to the door cautiously, ducking low. The moment he stepped inside, he felt it. The hearth's heat blazed unnaturally strong. Lanterns along the walls glowed brighter than before. It was as if the cabin itself sensed the danger bracing for impact. But Mark's men had vanished, no signs of them in sight. Tools lay scattered across the floor. Drawers yanked open, shelves overturned. They'd ransacked the place in panic, then fled. No, Mark wasn't the type to retreat without a plan. Eli's breath stayed steady as he scanned the room, listening. Nothing but the storm and the cabin creaking against the wind. He stepped into the center of the shadowed room, kicking aside a broken crate. "They'll come back," he whispered to himself. "And they'll come harder." Suddenly, the fire roared, sparks spiraling up the stone chimney. Eli jumped, then frowned. "What are you trying to tell me?" The flames surged again, casting light on a single wooden beam stretching floor to ceiling. Something gleamed on it. Eli moved closer, an old brass hook, one he hadn't noticed before. He reached out and tugged it gently. A compartment snapped open right at eye level. Inside lay a small metal cylinder tightly sealed. He carefully uncapped it. A rolled-up sheet of paper slid into his hand. Uncle Samuel's unmistakable handwriting sprawled across the page. "If they break into the cabin, don't confront them head-on. Retreat to the tunnels. Use the forest as your shield. A direct fight will only get you killed. But remember, you were never meant to perish here, Eli." Swallowing hard, Eli realized his uncle had planned every detail, even the dangers ahead. Even the escape routes were mapped out. He closed his eyes. "You knew they'd come. You knew they'd use family against you." A different line near the bottom caught his eye. "Remember, Hawk will always lead you along the safest path. Follow him." Suddenly, a thunderous crash shattered the silence outside. A tree branch crashed against the roof, sending dust plummeting from the rafters. Hawk barked sharply from the shelter behind. 3 short, high-pitched barks, a clear warning signal. Someone was closing in. Eli moved quickly. Grabbing the emergency kit from beneath the table, he slung it over his shoulder and slipped quietly through the back door. Rain hammered down, blurring his vision, but Hawk's dark silhouette stood out against the storm. Low to the ground, a steady growl fixed on the tree line. Eli hurried over. "Easy, boy. I'm right here with you." Hawk turned, nudging Eli's leg before jerking his head towards the dense woods.